Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, ALIVE, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm excited to dive into a topic that I haven't covered very much in this podcast, and that is around food and eating and health and wellness as a baseline, as a foundation of having a meaningful and productive life. And I think my way, I tend to explore a lot around the deeper aspects, or the inner, the psychological, the spiritual, all of that. But I've recognized in my past, couple decades of exploration that if I'm not healthy and well, if I'm not eating good food, I actually don't have the clarity. I don't have the capacity. I don't have that foundation and structure that's needed to create an amazing life. So I am really happy here to have Daniel Thomas Hind. Daniel, welcome.
Shayna, thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and Daniel is the founder of Evolution Eat, which is a transformational diet and lifestyle coaching company that's designed to help individuals who are overwhelmed revolutionize their relationship with food and permanently change the way they eat. And Daniel's approach is different in that most fitness experts talk about rapid weight loss and like all of those carrots, right, that lead you into the thing you could have and the image. And instead, he really helps you fall in love with the practice of healthy eating and make it sustainable. And, tens of thousands of people tune into Daniel's material to learn about the psychology, the mindset, the strategy, and habits around eating in order to live a more meaningful life. So thank you for being here to talk about this.
Thank you for having me again one more time. That is that intro always makes me feel a little warm and fuzzy inside, because it's true. Like, we all want to chase the carrot, and yet it's the process that gets us there, which is so important with any pursuit in life, right? Like, your career, your relationships, your health is no different. And so what I help people focus on is the process of healthy eating and the practice of healthy eating. And when you can really sink into that and think of your relationship with food as like an expression of yourself and who you are in this world, then it becomes automatic, right? Like effortless, in a way that you don't have to consciously think about it all the time. Like, oh, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? And losing weight as a result, if that's something that's important to you or that you need to do for yourself in order to be healthy, it becomes effortless, right? Yeah. Which then frees you up literally to be way more productive in all other areas of your life and reach your full potential. And I really,
right, which is, it's interesting. I mean, when I think about this, to be totally honest, I think like, sometimes even for me, it's like, God, I have to put attention on what I eat, and this feels like a drag, or I've got to give up certain things. And so I'm really interested in how you, like you said, you help people change, their practice of healthy eating and actually fall in love with the practice of healthy eating. So maybe you can give us a little background on, what did you struggle with before you actually put this into practice, and how did you come to understand how to do this and what's necessary, to make this happen?
Yeah, definitely. So I'll start by saying, to set the conversation, like, I think what distinguishes my approach and what we're building at Evolution Eats and other things that you see on the internet is that we treat the process of healthy eating like a skill that you develop and practice over time, over your entire lifetime, actually, right?
Yeah.
It's a skill. Just like if you were learning how to play the piano, for example, or develop any other skill that gives you a sense of purpose and meaning and what you want out of life,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so there's a lot baked into that, but like at the core of it, this isn't about, because it's a practice and because it's a skill, that means that you're likely not starting at expert level, right?
Right.
It means, right? And so that there's a whole growth curve that you have to embark upon and go up in order to improve. And so this is not about being perfect. This is actually about making mistakes and investing in those mistakes, and then immersing yourself in an entire context of self-development and learning that goes well beyond your diet itself. And the thing about health and wellness, unfortunately, is that we culturally equate being healthy or the process of getting healthy with going on a diet, right? Like, I'm going to go on a diet. And that whole dieting mentality sets us up for failure at the start, because it's typically like restrictive. You're depriving yourself. The process itself is one of like agony and pain, and I'm sacrificing something to get something else. And it's all about the result, right?
Right. And it's not, when I think about it, then it's like the only people who are in some ways motivated to eat well are people who want to lose weight, right? Versus like, oh, this is actually a foundation of having, like you said, a meaningful and a productive life, what we put in our bodies and how we eat.
Exactly. And so when you're removed from that outcome of like being healthy and consistently staying that way and really relating to food and your health and wellness, your well-being as like an expression of who you are in the world, when you're removed from that, you only think about, well, how do I get there, right? Like, I got to lose a bunch of weight. The same way that if you're struggling for money, you're like, God damn, how do I get, I got to make all the money and then everything will be better, right? But then a lot of people with money will say it's not about just having the money, it's who you are with that, right?
Yeah.
Who is that?
Yeah.
How are you using that in your life? How is that an expression of who you are and what's important to you, right? It's the same very concept, but when you're removed from it, when you're on the other side of it, you just see the finished product, you see the six-pack abs, et cetera, and that's what you want. And not to mention, that's what's marketed to you, right? So that's what you're
right. And you're saying that actually when you start to eat well and you start to focus on some of the skills that you teach, those things naturally happen more. Like, you lose weight, you get stronger, your body actually becomes more of a, more of a, what would you call it? Like that.
Just it's a resource. It's an engine. It's reliable.
Right. So this is great, for men who are either feeling overwhelmed, who are feeling tired in their lives, who aren't feeling as inspired as they want to feel, who, can't stay awake at night, who aren't feeling as sexually powerful as they want to feel. Right. I'm just realizing all of these, I would imagine are symptoms of, or could be symptoms of, hey, you're not actually using food in a way to fuel your engine.
Absolutely. And then so there's that piece. And then the one or two layers deeper than that is that then we mistakenly think that we have to like go on a diet to get the result, right? And then we sacrifice ourselves in order to achieve the result, which might get you the result, but doesn't actually result in learning anything. So you might get the goal, you might lose the 30 pounds, but if you haven't trained this into a lifestyle, you've instead only satisfied meeting that end result and sacrificed yourself to get there, then you won't keep it. Then it won't be yours to keep, right? Because you actually haven't made meaningful shifts in your life and your relationship to the food and your relationship to your schedule and your priorities.
Yeah. Okay, so can you make that a little clearer for someone who's listening? They're like, well, what actually does that lifestyle look like? What changes? What do you implement in
Well,
this new
yeah.
lifestyle?
Okay, sure. So it's treating this as a long-term process versus the short term, right? So the short term would be, okay, I need to lose X number of pounds. I need to lose 30 pounds. Let's say I want to lose 30 pounds. That will make me very happy. Great. If we're going to go in the traditional diet route, then that probably means we're going to start under eating. We're going to start focusing obsessively on calories, quantifying the experience. We're going to be always judging ourselves in like social situations. So like, oh, I'm being invited to go on a date or I'm going out with friends. Ooh, I'm not sure if I can do that because I'm on this diet thing and there's no possible way that I can be around those sort of contexts, right? So it becomes stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then, and then not to mention there's the whole exercise piece where they're like, okay, I'm going to lose a bunch of weight. That means I better start exercising 5 times a week. Meanwhile, I don't even have the habit of exercising once a week. Somehow I'm
Uh-huh.
going to go
Uh-huh.
from 1 to 5 and like, and maintain that. No. We try to play Mozart, extending the piano metaphor. A lot of people try to
Mm,
play Mozart on day one when
right.
they're simply not ready. They don't even know how to press the chords yet, right? Like they don't
Right,
even
which makes it completely unsustainable. Like you're setting yourself up for
exactly
failure.
precisely. And so you're setting yourself up for failure because one, even if you somehow muscle through it for
Yeah.
like a few months and
Yeah.
it, that think about that. I'm muscling through this thing in order to make it happen. Well, guess what? Then the relief that you experience of actually getting the goal, you completely let your guards down because you can't muscle through the rest of your life, right?
Right.
So it's an unsustainable practice because your operating principle isn't to muscle through. Your operating principle, if you want to keep this if you want to adopt this long term, is to make it automatic,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so, in the same way that somebody who's practiced the piano for 10 years, if they take a year off, they could still come back to the piano and probably play. They'll need to brush up a little bit, but they have that ingrained in them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and I'm curious what it was like for you when did you have a moment where you first realized, oh my God, the way I'm eating is not working for me? Or how did you get into this?
Oh, totally. Do you got a minute? I'll try to keep the story. Yeah, I'll try to keep the story really short. So to set the context, I live here in Los Angeles in Santa Monica.
Mm-hmm.
God bless Santa Monica. It's my favorite place on earth now. But I'm a New Yorker,
Yeah.
and sometimes I'm a Long Islander New Yorker. So sometimes my Long Island will precede me, and I'll pronounce things a certain way that people are like, "Are you from Jersey?" I'm like, "No. One
No,
one
Jersey's
notch,
different from a
yeah,
Long Island. Let's just be
one
clear.
one notch up from Jersey. Okay, I'm Long Island, so
Yeah.
yeah, right." And so, okay, so how did I get into this? I'll give you the quick version because it
Okay.
could go for a while. But um, despite what I look like today, and I get this a lot, people ask me like, "What the hell do you know about disempowered relationship with food and emotional eating and being overweight and all that?" And I'm like, I totally feel you. But despite what I look like today, I am a former fat Italian kid from Long Island. And
Mm.
while I'm no longer fat, I am still definitely Italian. And in my family, food was love.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there was a lot of love growing up, if you know what I mean. And I'm an only child. And my mother, God bless her heart, she loved me so much. She saturated
Right.
me with so much love.
Yep.
And food became part of that equation very early. And so did doing well at school. School is like since I can ever remember, school is like the contract. If you do well in school, you get whatever you want. And
Mm.
so food became a reward structure for me. Like if I do
Right.
well, I get to eat.
You
And
get
mom loves me.
cookies or you
Yeah.
get, right. I have a
Oh yeah.
6-year-old, so it's like,
Yep.
right. I get
I
all
love
those
that.
things.
When I was growing up, that's when McDonald's started to introduce, like, went crazy with all their Happy Meals,
Uh-huh.
all
Uh-huh.
the toys and the Monopoly games. Oh my God, I was obsessed with like getting the Monopoly game,
Yep.
the stickers, to pretending that I was gonna win. They always had the what do they have? They had like they had some crazy car that I thought this year we're gonna get it. The
This
Dodge.
year, this year I'm gonna win the car.
We're gonna win the convertible.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was just thinking like, wow, that's a whole,
Oh,
McDonald's and fast food and the influence on
oh
our eating.
yeah. Oh yeah. Because they get you as a little kid. You want
Right?
to get the toy. You get the whole thing. It's amazing.
Brilliant.
It's brilliant marketing. They make you addicted from day one.
Yep.
And so reward structure. Only child. Both of my parents worked full time, so I was home a lot. So food
Mhm.
became entertainment. Food became friend. Food was something that I could predict I could predictably rely upon to make me feel good.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. And then how did that carry into your adult life? How did
Yeah,
that show up?
totally. So I grew up that way throughout my teens and throughout my college years, where
Mhm.
I was it exposed itself when I was in college, when I started to really, I hurt my knee my freshman year, and that's a whole funny story, but I'll get for another time. I hurt my
Mhm.
knee my freshman year, and I started to really focus on my health and fitness when I started to rehabilitate. And so by like my sophomore or junior year, I was exercising like 7 days a week, and yet still wasn't getting the results that I thought I should be getting for
Mm.
crushing it so hard, right? I'm like, I still don't look the way that I want to be looking, and I'm putting in
Uh-huh.
a hell of a lot of work. What's going on here? So there was that. Plus, uh, plus I noticed that I was using food as like the way that some people use a drug. Like,
Yeah.
it's late at night and I'm going to stay up late to study for finals. And instead of, I would have, whereas a lot of people were doing Adderall and stuff like that, I would just like drink a ton of coffee and eat a ton of food. And I would just
Mm.
eat food to keep going.
Yeah.
And so I noticed that, but I don't think I had the awareness at the time. It wasn't until a few years later when I went paleo. For anybody who's curious of what a paleo diet is, it's basically just eating as our evolutionary ancestors ate, right? So if it was grown or born on Earth, it's probably okay to eat. It's just depending on what's important to you, the macronutrients and all that you can kind of shift. But to make it very simple, if our evolutionary ancestors grew up eating it, then that's a good place to start. And
Versus processed foods,
versus
all these
processed
in
sugars,
boxes and colors and
yeah, and gluten and grains, and most dairy. Kind of remove that. Before I go, before I go into all that, I think that that's important. An evolutionary diet is important, but I don't say that. I don't promote paleo because one, if we're thinking about the mastery curve, then wherever you are today might not be where you want to be, and I don't want to ever remove anybody from the experience before they've started. And I don't have to be right. Like I work with
uh-huh.
vegetarians. I even work with a few vegans. It's not about doing my diet. It's about doing what's your dream diet, right? Like,
That's great.
what's an
I love that.
experience
So
that
you take into account the individual.
Absolutely. This
Yeah.
is not about me promoting my specific way. I have principles and things that I really believe in. And if you're a vegan, then and or vegetarian, then that's totally cool.
Yeah.
There are certain just dietary staples that are important that we're aware of, that you're getting enough protein so that you're actually full and not craving sugar. But okay, now putting that piece aside, back
Yeah.
to my story.
Yeah.
I fully adopted a paleo lifestyle at the time, and like lost all the weight that I thought I should have lost when I was in college and exercising 7 days a week. I lost all that weight, and I looked like a model. I mean, I looked extraordinary, and I felt that way for the first time in my life, super
Uh-huh.
empowered. And
And
yet
did it stick?
it did stick.
Okay.
It did stick. So this stuck. Yeah, it stuck. And that's how I got into the whole coaching thing. People started to ask me what was up.
Uh-huh.
And like, how did you keep it? Like, it's 2 years later, how are you still doing it? And I thought, that's a funny question, because it's so easy. Like it makes me feel so good that it's not even a conscious choice.
Hmm.
It's fun. It's fun. It's fun to nerd out a little bit on like making sure that I'm eating the foods that I want, but not in a way of like, I'm quantifying the experience. I
Uh-huh.
eat tons of whatever I want. I eat tons of healthy fats, tons of healthy proteins. I eat seconds and thirds frequently. Like, it's not about quantifying the experience. It just became this fun thing that I was doing with myself. And people kept asking me to coach them. And eventually I was like, well, if you keep asking, I might as well. I tried to resist it as much as possible. I would like write up guides for them. And I would say, here, read this. And then everything changed.
Finally, right? It was like, okay.
Everything changed the day that, everything changed the day that somebody said, here, I'm going to pay you to coach me, because it's not just about the information. If I forget who said this.
Okay, this is a really good point.
Yeah, if it was just about the information, then we would all be billionaires with six packs, right? So it's not about the information. With the internet, we have access to all the information you would ever need.
Right.
Eat an optimal diet and stay that way. However, why can't we follow through despite knowing what's good for us and having
such a good question
and such clear intentions too, right? Like, I so want this.
Yes.
And yet we feel disempowered all the time, and we continuously fall short of our goals.
Yes. I love this, right? Why can we not make this happen for those of us who want to eat more healthy, or want to lose weight, or want to be stronger, or want to have a more consistent source of energy, right? There are really powerful motivations. So what's happening when people can't, sustain that?
So so when I started to get into the coaching, I started to ask myself those questions, like, what is actually going on? And I realized a few things. One, and I was looking at my own personal experience, my own journey that got me there. One, I grew up addicted to food, and I didn't know it. And I certainly wouldn't have called it that, addicted to food. That sounds freaking scary, addicted to food, right? Yeah. That's one. Two, so point on that, like, and I really do mean that. Like, I know what it's like to stand in front of a fridge and just eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, almost like you're possessed, like you don't have a choice. And here's the thing, and I'm happy to talk about this. It still shows up even to this day sometimes. It
does.
Yep. Happy to talk about that. So one, I was addicted to food and I didn't even know it. And I think that many people in the Western world also are addicted to food.
And can I just ask you a side note on that? Because I imagine for some people, like for you, it was, standing in front of the fridge and eating and eating and eating. But for other people, the addiction might look different, right? Like, I eat at night, or, I eat foods that taste really good and I don't consider whether they're healthy for me or not, right? Do you have other ways the addiction shows up?
Absolutely. Yes. And it's, I would put it under this category. Like, two, I was an emotional eater, and I am an emotional eater. And I think that emotional eating is the primary reason that people can't stick to their diets. And I don't mean going on a diet, but just eating any sort of healthy diet. They're like, oh, I want to do this for myself. We are all emotional beings, and we often let our emotions dictate our decisions, even when we know better. Does that sound familiar? Right?
Yes.
Right. And it's even harder because we're all addicted to food to some degree or another. And it's even harder because then all of that food is marketed at you. It's like really flashing in bright lights, and it's culturally part of the way that we socialize. Oh, here, have this, have this, have this.
Totally.
Have this. And it's ubiquitous.
Right. And you can't not eat, you can not drink, or you can not smoke, or you can not shop, or you can do some of these other things, but you actually have to eat.
Right. So you have to eat, and food is ubiquitous. I mean, now if you're in a major city, I mean, I have like 6 apps on my phone that can get food to me within 15 minutes, and all the tastiest food I would ever want. Right. So it's ubiquitous. So do you see how many layers this goes? Which is
many layers.
Which is why just saying to somebody here, follow this diet plan. And it's like, okay, great. But life is happening, and life is really challenging, right?
Yes.
Right? There's so many distractions and stimulations coming our way at any waking moment. And if you're like a high performer or whatever that means, if you're a high performer, you have a high stress job, you have a high demand job, you're in charge of you have a family that you're taking care of.
Right. You've got not very much time to actually put into food preparation or even thinking about what you're putting in your body.
And just so many responsibilities that it's really hard to make these choices for yourself repeatedly. So what do we do as humans, as emotional beings? We look to things that make us feel good, right? To just like baseline, to normalize, to stabilize, to give ourselves little injections of like dopamine hits throughout the day, because life can be very stressful. And
Yes.
so and so that's where this that's where this idea of like your diet and your health is baseline to a meaningful life. Because if you don't focus on it, then it can really get the best of you. And whether you suffer from this, like, and you're on the spectrum of binge eating frequently, or you're just kind of always living with this dissatisfaction of like, I know I should be eating better, but I can't do it kind of thing. And like that,
all the way to probably even not eating, right? Not eating
to the other end of the spectrum. Oh yeah. And I work with people in this camp too, where it's like, my only way of exerting control over this whole complex is by not eating as much as long as I can. And then it becomes a game of how long can I not eat, which somehow becomes like, that becomes the reward structure. And also a sense of pride, which, you know, again, that's like, we need food to eat. We need food to eat. We need food to
survive,
to live, just to thrive,
to think, right? I mean,
yeah. And so I want to paint this picture nicely. If we go back to high school psychology class, or maybe this was college psychology class, I'm not sure. But do we all remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? It's a theory of like psychological health that's predicated on fulfilling innate human needs and priority from the bottom up, right?
And that we can't actually focus on less foundational things unless our foundational needs are met.
Yes. And so it culminates in self-actualization at the very top, which is like a blissful life, which is what we all aspire to, right? And it's marketed at you in every which way.
Right.
But like, so at the bottom of that pyramid is your physical health and well-being.
Yeah.
And so it's like, we all focus on our health from this perspective of need to lose weight, and or my doctor tells me that I'm really unhealthy, I need to do something about it. So like scare, right? But we don't focus on it as the bedrock of a meaningful and productive life. And I think that if we started to, then we would realize that life doesn't mean a 3-month, lose 30 pounds scheme. It means life. It means how do we develop a relationship with food, with our wellness, and with ourselves ultimately, that leads to a productive and meaningful life. And
awesome.
So if you don't do that, then as Maslow might suggest, or I certainly am, no matter how successful you are in all other areas of your life, without solving for your diet, you'll literally always be weighed down by your preoccupation with food and dieting and eating, or the way that you feel physically and psychologically. In short, you'll be out of alignment with yourself, which makes self-actualization, I would say, impossible.
I was going to say damn near impossible, right?
Therefore, never fully reaching your full potential. Right.
Okay. So this is powerful, right? And I think you've made an incredible case for getting this handled, right? For, someone or a man getting this part of his life handled. How would you start the process with a man who's like, either I don't really think about what I eat, or wow, actually hearing you talk, I realize I do eat emotionally, or, where I know it's unique to each individual, but do you have a sense of how you start with people?
Yes. So there are a few basic things that we work on simultaneously. And I'll list them off.
Yeah.
So we're working on your diet, of course, but like your diet, which I hope is clear after just hearing us have this conversation, it's just one piece of the puzzle of being healthy, as in the actual food that you're eating, the nutrition. It's just one piece. There's so much more going on that influences your decision making. So it's your diet, it's your mindset, it's your version of your emotional dependency on food and your particular habit loops. Like, we all have different routines that we automatically, they're like predictable ways of being with ourselves when we're feeling a certain way. So for me, for example, like if it's later at night and I have told myself, and or circumstances arrange themselves such that I just know that I'm going to have to be up later working than I would typically like. That to me, and because so single bachelor, I live alone, that's nobody's around, which is important. That to me is like trigger zone. I am the likelihood that I'm going to either eat everything that's in the fridge or eat well more than I actually need and or order takeout skyrockets. So that's my trigger, because it's like, I think I told you that was a habit, that was a pattern that I did when I was in college, and we were just eating until like 2 a.m. so I could get the paper done or whatever. So there's that. And also,
so it sounds like it's important for each person to actually recognize where are the places I'm going to fall off or into unhealthy habits.
Yeah. What are your disempowered routines? You know, for some people, it's like my boss emails me in the middle of or like anytime my boss emails me and I feel stressed out about it, I run down to the snack machine or around the corner and I get you know, a Snickers bar or whatever it is for you. It shows up. And for some people, especially women, I know this, that mostly men are listening to your show, but for women, a lot of women that I work with, it's constant snacking and picking at things throughout the day.
And what happens for men? Do you notice differences?
For men, I've noticed that it's typically isolated towards the end of the day. And this doesn't have to be right? But based on doing this for the past 5 years, like it's typically isolated at the end of the day. Nobody knows about it. And if they do know about it, we're going to make it into a joke. So for example, I had this one client, Terry, who for his entire life, like unconsciously binged at nights, like after he already went to bed. And when he was telling me about this, I was just fascinated that like he knew that this was happening. He would wake up in the middle of the night, he would go to his fridge and he would just like eat a sleeve of Oreos and put peanut butter and drink milk and like then go back to bed. And his family knew about it and they made it into a joke. Like, dad's the cookie monster, just going nuts with the cookies kind of thing. And so if they do know about it, then we're going to make it into a joke so that I don't actually have to address it. And I don't know, we never got into this because we actually solved for this entire complex. I don't know if he actually was unconscious about it or if that was just a defense mechanism that he had been living by for years and years and years. It's like easier for me to say I'm unconscious and I'm not really sure that this is happening. And I don't have to be right. I could be wrong and maybe he was, but that might be going on there. So it's like there's a removal from me having responsibility for it if anybody knows about it. But typically nobody does know about it. And this mostly shows up with my execs, with my executive clients who are so interesting, who are traveling a bunch and are in hotels frequently.
Yep.
And oh my God, it's the late night room service. It's the late night room service.
It's also just no surprise to me that you know, there's just such a pattern with men of this kind of isolation or not showing it, right? And kind of having hidden under the surface or behind closed doors, these habits that are shameful. And yet it's like, I can't tell anyone about this because then I wouldn't seem powerful or trustworthy or all of this. So
like nobody wants to tell their friends, shit. I order, it's 1 a.m. and I've just ordered like room service 2 or 3 times because I'm really stressed out or Daniel, I'm speaking as myself now. I don't like going to sleep. Like I like staying up and it's really hard to go to bed. So it's just like something that I can do with myself. Eat. Right. It's literally as simple as that sometimes. It's something that I can do with myself. So eat. And it's really embarrassing. This is what we tell ourselves, to tell our friends that we're doing this, right? To tell our family that we're doing this. And with food, I mean, yes, it shows up over time in the way that you look, but you can hide it in a way that you can't hide a drug addiction or alcoholism, right? To this extent. And so it's like these in isolated circumstances, it's pretty innocuous. Okay, I had one night where I ate way too much. Okay, no big deal. But when that becomes a pattern and a way of being with yourself, then it's something. And so I went into all that because it's really important to know what the emotional payoff is that you specifically are looking for. Because that habit of like, Well, it's just something that I'm doing with myself, right? Like I'm just having fun with myself, and I do that through eating, right? Okay.
Not the full story.
Well, it's not the full story, but it is also sometimes true. Like we just eat out of boredom and because we're seeking novelty. For other times, it's because we're stressed and we just want something to make us feel good that's dependable. For other times, it's like we're really lonely.
Right? Totally right.
And so eating becomes, like I said, my growing up, it's a friend. It's something that you can rely upon that makes you feel good. And then it's like, well, if I'm going to eat, then I'm going to turn on the Netflix. I'm going to create a whole experience for myself. And so eating becomes a part of taking, quote unquote, taking care of yourself. And so it's fat, right? This is fascinating because this expresses in all of us. I think anybody who's listening can say, well, yeah, I see how this is showing up in my life, even a little bit, right? I wouldn't say I suffer from this, but I see how this is showing up. And so it's really important to see what your emotional payoffs are. And for some people, it's the entire spectrum, but for others, it's very specific. And getting clear on that, we can then create new habits and new patterns in your life that give you those emotional payoffs that have nothing to do with food. Right?
Amazing.
Right.
Amazing.
And so that's why this level of work is intensive in the way that I've created it. But that's where it gets very specific. There are a few baseline things which I'd love to just give your listeners just some advice on. The first is to completely counter this whole dieting mentality thing. I would say the first thing I always say to my clients is, okay, great. We're going to eat more than enough of the good stuff. Like we're going to actually load up your diet on all the healthy stuff that that we collectively have determined is important to you.
Is good for you and important.
Right. So a lot of people say to me, they're going to come to me and they say, I want to eat clean. And we're like, we dissect what that means. So let's just say for the sake of simplicity, that was a paleo diet. It's like, okay, great. Then rather than approach this from a restrictive deprivational point of view, where it's like, okay, let's focus on everything that you can't have, which is what most people do when they approach their new diet. They just obsess about the things that they can have, which makes full adoption very hard because all you're ever doing is thinking about what's not available to you.
What you're missing.
You want it more, right? So instead of doing that, I say you can have all the stuff that you don't, that we're gonna try, that you would like to remove. Have it all at the beginning. Instead of focusing on that, let's just focus on loading up on all of the good stuff. So let's make sure that you're eating more than enough protein, more than enough fat, more than enough, and literally eat more of it than your body, than you think that you need. So that what we're doing is developing the positive and nourishing relationship with yourself that you're training the habit of making healthy choices, not of trying to lose weight as quickly as possible. That will lead you to the whole deprivation restriction side. So again, the first thing that I should say then is we have to agree that this is a long-term approach. This is a long-term. If you want to lose 30 pounds as quickly as possible, just don't work with me. I'm not going to be that guy for you. What ends up happening is that when we do this, you start to actually integrate very quickly and you'll start to lose the weight if you have, especially if you have a lot to lose, which is like I call it the backdoor strategy. You get everything that you want, but without focusing on it, which makes it even better because it's a huge surprise. Yay. Yes. But but that's not the expectation. The expectation is that you're going to train the habit of eating healthily, of making healthy choice after healthy choice, and of establishing a relationship with your stomach, with your gut, with your mind, and with your heart, that you're feeding yourself and you're giving your body what it needs. So that's one.
Awesome. Yeah. Give us the other couple of baselines.
Yeah, so that's one. Number two is starting the day on your terms. It could be, and what I mean is, a very simple morning routine. And you could go into a whole elaborate routine if you want, but we got to start small. And the reason is because you're starting the day on your terms. It is coming into alignment with yourself, being intentional with who you are. So many of us wake up, especially people with a lot of responsibilities, executives, people who've got, entrepreneurs, people who have their own businesses. We wake up, the first thing that we go to is the phone, and we start reacting to this entire world beyond us without giving ourselves even a moment to come into alignment and to determine, to declare what's important to me today, right? And I know for me, when I wake up, even though I have this 90-minute morning routine, which I can talk about, but I have this 90-minute morning routine, and only until I get through that, I feel like a little baby with all these fears and like stresses, and it's just living inside of me. I wake up.
Right. And to wake up and actually give attention to that, to acknowledge, oh, sometimes I do feel stressed, I feel overwhelmed, I feel scared, I feel all these things, and actually get to put attention on that before you dive into taking care of everybody else. And right, to start your day in that way, it creates a whole different life experience.
Exactly. So if you're waking up and you're reacting to the world outside of yourself, and you haven't honored all the natural stresses and things that those energies that are living inside of us when we wake up. And it makes sense because when we wake up, our cortisol levels are actually jacked, like higher, they're higher. So it makes sense that we're feeling that way. If we don't honor any of that and we just go into our day reacting, what are the chances that you're then going to use food as an emotional crutch, or just react to it because it's around you, right?
Yes.
So many people just mindlessly reach for the donut or the cookie or whatever's offered to you at the office lunch or the office breakfast because it's simply there, right? And then only afterwards say, why the hell did I eat that? I just had breakfast. Like I'm not even hungry. There's
totally. Okay, good. So let's do the baseline just for time's sake. Give us the other baselines, and this is how men can start. And then I want to hear, if men want more, how to find you.
Totally. So eat enough of the good stuff, morning routine, and then lastly, have a support structure. So if time is your excuse at the beginning, and working with me or working with anybody who does this sort of work, you'll learn that there's more time, that you can actually create time, that time is an illusion, and that we create it, especially for the things that are most important to us. And guess what? If your health and your wellness is baseline to a meaningful life, then you will have to apply some effort.
Yes.
That's not a bad thing. We've been sold that we should be able to get this by taking a pill and lose 10 pounds, right? We've been sold that it should only take 30 days to get the gold. It doesn't work that way. You do have to apply effort to everything that's important to you in life. You have to apply effort. That does not mean hard work where you have to hate the experience, but effort in the same way that if you're a painter and you love painting, you have to apply effort to put what's in your brain and in your heart onto the canvas, right?
And I love it. I'm a firm believer in we actually do create time for what's meaningful and important to us, and we have more of it than we realize.
Absolutely. But so just knowing that, okay, now I imagine that if you're successful in any number of areas in your life, business, family, then you've built a support structure for yourself, right? If you're a businessman businessman, because that's our audience here, then you have maybe an assistant, you certainly have a team that you're working with. Your success is not because you're some genius who just isolates himself in the corner, right? It's because and if you think about this, the most successful people in life have recruited and enrolled the most people around them to empower their vision, right?
Yes.
So thinking of it that way, having a support structure, being honest with your spouse and your family and your friends, and or practically speaking, if you do have an assistant, your assistant.
Yeah.
One big piece,
bringing this out into the light to have people around you who know what you're doing and support.
Hey, assistant, I'm gonna need an omelet on my desk when I get into the office. Yeah, order it from the corner store there. Here are a few, I'm going to need this for lunch, and I'm going to need this for dinner, or I'm going to need a few healthy snack options because I'm going to get hungry at 4 p.m, right?
Right, or having a conversation with your partner of okay, here are the things that feel that are healthy, are going to support my health and well-being in our relationship. And so let's plan this together. Yeah. So this is awesome.
Absolutely.
Good.
And it's because we want to defend ourselves and say I can figure this out, or I should be able to figure this out. I get that all the time. I should be able to figure this out by myself. Something's wrong with me because I can't.
Right. And
no
that's
way.
Not true.
We just determine how much is coming at us and how stressful life is, and how we literally use food as an emotional relief support structure. So we need support. we need support in getting what's most important to us in our lives.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this has been a totally power-packed, full, amazing conversation. And I think it gives men something to just, even jump in right away and start with. And, and then how do they find you if they want to work with you? What's the best place or way to contact you?
Totally. Well, thank you. This has been such a. I've had a blast this conversation.
I'm glad.
Having me again. So my company is called Evolution Eats, EAT, Evolution Eats, one word, .com, and I offer. So there's a ton of free, awesome content around like all the things that we've been talking about. I really try to share as much as possible. If you are interested in working in a meaningful way, then I do offer one-on-one coaching. It's super intensive, and it's for people who really who are highly committed to going all in and changing their lives in that way, to like dramatically changing their lives. And we have an awesome 6-month group coaching program as well, where it's going to go more at your own pace, but I distill all the things that we've talked about in my just in my method. And throughout 6 months, you get lessons, you get weekly trainings, you get calls with me. There's a whole support group. There's a community that are holding you accountable, and they're both equally as good. Just depends on what your needs are. But you can reach out to. I want to throw this opportunity out to your listeners. If you are interested in working together, or you just have some questions that you really want answered that are specific to you, I definitely invite you to shoot me personally an email, and you can just say in the subject line, like Shayna podcast. I haven't thought about this. Shayna podcast. Yeah. And that's perfect.
Awesome.
And either I or my assistant will be on the lookout for those, so that I actually respond to those.
Thank you for being willing to actually answer questions and
totally.
dive into this more. And thank you so much for doing this today. This was awesome.
Thank you, Shayna. I really appreciate you.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.